We are witnessing the final gasping breath of the post-World War II international order, and it is not ending with a treaty or a summit, but with a shakedown. What we are seeing unfold in real time is not diplomacy. It is not statecraft. It is the geopolitics of the protection racket. We have moved beyond the era of soft power and entered the age of raw transactional extortion, where the President of the United States looks at an ally, a G7 partner, a founding member of NATO, and treats them not as a sovereign equal, but as a delinquent shopkeeper who hasn't paid their insurance. The headline you are seeing regarding a 200% tariff on French wines is not a trade story. If you read this as a dispute over imports and exports, you are missing the forensic evidence of a much larger crime scene. This is a story about the weaponization of the American economy to force political submission, and the terrifying reality is that this is the new baseline for American foreign policy. Let's strip away the noise and look at the anatomy of this confrontation. French President Emmanuel Macron, a leader with his own domestic timeline and sovereign prerogatives, reportedly declined a seat on Donald Trump's so-called Board of Peace. Let's pause on that Orwellian title for a moment. A Board of Peace that includes invitations to Vladimir Putin, a man with an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court, yet is being used as a bludgeon against France. When Macron refused to lend the credibility of the French Republic to this performative body, the response from the White House was immediate and punitive. It wasn't a diplomatic cable. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a threat to incinerate an entire sector of the French economy. Trump's logic here is chilling in its simplicity. Join my board, legitimize my photo op, or I will destroy your champagne industry. He'll join, Trump said, but he doesn't have to join. That is the language of a mob boss offering you a choice between a signature on a contract or a broken kneecap. It is the illusion of choice masking the reality of coercion. We must understand the forensic psychology on display here. Trump dismisses Macron's resistance by citing his term limit, noting he will be out of office soon. This reveals the transactional narcissism that now defines our executive branch. To Trump, the French state does not exist as a permanent entity with enduring interests. It exists only as a vessel for the current leader's ego. Because Macron is leaving, he is weak, and therefore, France is ripe for exploitation. The tariff threat, 200%, is not an economic calculation derived from trade deficits or currency manipulation. It is a punishment tax. It is a fine for disobedience. By deploying tariffs as a weapon of personal retribution rather than national economic strategy, the president is signaling to every capital from Berlin to Tokyo that American markets are no longer open based on rules, but based on loyalty to the man in the Oval Office. But if the coercion of France is the opening act, the situation regarding Greenland is the main event, and it represents a complete disintegration of the concept of national sovereignty. We have heard the jokes before. We have heard the nervous laughter about Trump wanting to buy an island. Stop laughing. This is not a real estate deal. This is a territorial acquisition threat backed by the specter of military and economic force. Trump's rhetoric regarding Greenland, claiming we have to have it, is the language of annexation. When he states that European leaders won't push back too much, he is betting on the fracturing of the European resolve, a bet he is rigging by threatening 25% tariffs on 8 different nations until his demands are met. This is a hostage situation where the hostage is the territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark. The justification offered for this aggression requires a forensic dissection of its own because it is built on a profound and dangerous ignorance of history. Trump's dismissal of Denmark's sovereignty, saying, "Just because the boat went there 500 years ago and then left, that doesn't give you title to property," is not just a jagged, incoherent reading of international law. It is a direct assault on the Westphalian system that has governed global affairs for centuries. He is erasing 500 years of history, legal precedent, and the self-determination of the Greenlandic people with a single dismissive sentence about a boat. This is the logic of the conqueror. It posits that history does not matter, treaties do not matter, and title is determined solely by who has the power to seize it today. When the President of the United States argues that Denmark can't protect Greenland, he is invoking the classic pretext used by empires throughout history to swallow smaller neighbors. It is the argument of security necessity. By claiming the territory is needed for world security, he frames the aggression as an act of benevolence. This is the exact rhetorical device Vladimir Putin used to justify the annexation of Crimea and the invasion of Ukraine. The idea that a smaller nation's sovereignty is a security risk to the superpower next door. For an American president to adopt the Kremlin's logic of territorial expansion is a catastrophic realignment of global values. We are no longer the guarantor of borders. We have become the entity that erases them. Look closely at the interplay between the president and his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Rubio attempts to sanitize the insanity, framing it as a preference to buy, trying to retrofit the president's raw impulses into something resembling a transaction. But the president has not ruled out force. He has not ruled out the military option. He has explicitly linked the lifting of crushing economic sanctions, tariffs on the UK and others, to the surrender of territory. This is hybrid warfare waged against our closest allies. When you threaten to bankrupt the British economy and the French wine industry, unless they acquiesce to the transfer of a landmass the size of Western Europe, you are not engaging in diplomacy. You are engaging in a siege. The Board of Peace snub is inextricably linked to the Greenland demand. They are two sides of the same coin. The board is about compelling political fealty. Greenland is about compelling territorial submission. Both are tests of loyalty. Trump is drawing a line in the sand and forcing every nation to choose. Submit to the new American hegemony and pay your tribute, or stand on your sovereignty and face economic ruin. The terrifying part is his calculation that Europe is too weak, too divided, and too dependent on American defense to resist. He is counting on the fact that the post-war institutions, the UN, NATO, the EU, are hollow shells that will crumble under the weight of raw American pressure. This approach creates a vacuum of trust that will take generations to refill. Why would any nation sign a trade deal with the United States today, knowing it can be torn up tomorrow because the president felt insulted by a snub? Why would any nation rely on American security guarantees when the president views their territory as a potential acquisition? We are watching the systematic dismantling of the alliance network that won the Cold War. By alienating France, threatening the UK, and bullying Denmark, we are isolating ourselves in a way that Beijing and Moscow could only dream of achieving on their own. We are doing their work for them. We are proving their propaganda right, that the United States is just another imperial power, no different from the empires of old, interested only in extraction and dominance. The silence from the legislative branch is deafening. Where are the constitutional checks? Where is the Congress asserting its authority over commerce and war? They are paralyzed, watching as the executive branch operates like a rogue state within the international system. The legal implications here are profound. Imposing tariffs for reasons entirely unrelated to trade economics, using them as leverage for territorial expansion or political retribution, is a grotesque abuse of the statutes that grant the president emergency economic powers. It is a perversion of the law, but without a Congress willing to act, the law is just paper. This geopolitical shakedown is also a distraction, a chaotic fireworks display meant to dazzle and confuse while the machinery of democracy is stripped for parts at home. But the consequences abroad are real and immediate. We are pushing Europe into a corner. If they capitulate, they cease to be sovereign powers and become vassal states. If they retaliate, and they are weighing punitive economic countermeasures, we enter a trade war that will decimate the global economy, drive up inflation, and sever the transatlantic bond that has kept the peace for 80 years. We must also consider the message this sends to the autocrats. When Trump invites Putin to a board of peace while threatening Macron with economic warfare, he is signaling a reversal of alliances. He is aligning with the strongmen who view the world as a zero-sum game of conquest. And he is spurning the democratic leaders who operate within the rule of law. He is telling the world that it is better to be a dictator with a tank division than a democratic president with a parliament. He is validating the idea that might makes right. The boat comment was not a gaffe. It was a worldview. It was a declaration that the past does not bind him, that laws do not constrain him, and that the only title to property or power that matters is the one you can take by force. This is the end of the diplomatic era. We are now in the arena of the bully, and in that arena, there are no allies, only victims and accomplices. The wines of France and the ice of Greenland are just the first assets to be liquidated in this fire sale of American credibility. We have to stop treating these outbursts as isolated incidents of eccentricity. They are dots in a very clear, very dark pattern. The tariff is the weapon, the territory is the prize. The destruction of the international order is the collateral damage. We are watching a president willing to burn down the village to roast his own marshmallow, willing to dismantle the Western alliance because he feels slighted by a snub. This is not strength. It is a dangerous, fragile vanity armed with the nuclear codes and the world's largest economy. You need to understand that this does not stop with French wine. It does not stop with Greenland. Once the principle is established that the United States can and will use total economic warfare to seize what it wants from its friends, no nation is safe and no norm is sacred. The world is watching us, not with respect, but with horror. They are watching a superpower cannibalize its own alliances. History is filled with leaders who confused fear with respect, who thought that dominion was the same as leadership. They usually leave ruin in their wake. We are standing on the precipice of that ruin. The Board of Peace is a farce. The Greenland demand is a threat. The tariffs are a weapon. And the silence you hear from those who should be stopping this, that is the sound of complicity. Do not look away. Do not normalize this. Do not let the absurdity of the headlines numb you to the severity of the threat. This is how the architecture of the free world collapses. Not with a bang, but with a tariff, a snub, and a shakedown. Stay vigilant, because if you miss the daily escalation, you miss the moment where the damage becomes irreversible.